Now we are going to talk about how those fish which are in the salt water maintain the water and salt concentrations within their body. Right, so this is an illustration with an animal is a fish. So you need to think about saltwater fish as a hypoosmotic organisms where the internal environment is less concentrated than the external environment. So what the facts are that these fish have low salt concentration in the body as compared to the outside. So the gradient would be from outward to inward of the animal body. Okay, let me activate the pen. Right, so the salts will come in. Okay, so before I draw these things, you need to know that two legends that these solid arrows, which will appear on this diagram, explains the active transmission of the compounds where the energy is required. Animal has to do it by will and by using the energy, whereas that these dotted lines explains the passive transport of the compounds and materials and water that does not require any energy, and this is only by diffusion, right? So what happens that since their internal environment is less concentrated, the water contents are higher within the animal as compared to the outside, so the water tends to move out of the body through gills by passive transport. Salts, because the salts concentration is higher in the external water and lower in the internal body, so the salts will start moving within the animal body as a passive transport without animal's intention. So इससे क्या होगा कि salt concentration high होते जाएंगी animal के set level से, so they need a mechanism to remove excessive salts and absorb more water into the body to keep the internal environment constant. So what they do, they will drink more water to replenish that this passive loss of the water, and then they will spit out excessive salts from their mouth and specific salt secreting cells. Right, so they have specific iron secreting cells in their kidneys that will filter out much of the salt from the blood and release it with the urine into the outside environment. Right, so this is the mechanism. And then the gills have specific salt cells which also absorb the salts from the body and release them in the outer environment. So this is the way the saltwater fish maintains their internal environment less concentrated as compared to the external environment. So this is the explanatory diagram. You can read it through, right? So I have already explained it for you. So now we are going towards the mechanism of maintaining the internal environment or osmoregulation in freshwater fish. Right, so this is a freshwater fish which is living in a media where which is less concentrated as to the animal's internal body. So they are hyperosmotic animals. So considering the less concentrated external medium, we can see that water will come into the animal's body by passive transport, and the salts will go out of the animal's body by passive transport because more salts are present within the body as compared to the outside. Right, so the water goes in by itself and salts comes out by itself by diffusion. So the fish, when the water is coming in by itself to check this excessive water, the fish does not drink much of the water, so they do not consume much water, and they release more of the water in the form of the urine to reduce the water level within the animal's body. Similarly, there are those ion exchange pumps. Beta chloride cells are present in their gills, which filter out the salts from the external environment and gets them back into the animal's body to keep it more concentrated as compared to the external environment. Right, so this is all that explanatory diagram of this mechanism. Right, so that was the general mechanism of osmoregulation, guys. But when we talk about the sharks and stingrays, there is some difference as compared to the other saltwater fish. The shark and stingrays have a different mechanism. Kidneys conserve urea in the blood, right? Because the sharks and rays live in the deep water, which is more concentrated than the top water. So they must have a specific mechanism, because using that earlier mechanism by releasing excessive salts of the body is not possible, or it will require much of the energy, which is not feasible for the animal. So they have developed a mechanism where much of the urea, which is the byproduct of their food digestion and respiration, that urea is not released from the urine or from the kidneys. Instead, it is sent back to the blood, so that the concentration of the urea increases, and and the internal concentration becomes equal. Solute concentrations actually becomes equal to the external concentration, so that the salts are not lost due to not absorbed from the external environment due to passive transport, right? So, but these levels are very high, and this could be toxic to the animal. So, to solve this issue, the animal has developed a mechanism of producing trimethylamine oxide (TMAO), which is another compound which neutralizes the toxic effects of the urea, right? So, hence this way, the animal preserves the internal osmolarity equal to the marine water, and checks out the diffusive movement of the salts between the animal's body and the external environment. The high concentration of the urea in the blood and body tissues of the sharks is about 100 times higher as that in the mammals, and this could not be tolerated by other vertebrates. Right, so in this such high concentrations of urea disrupts the peptide bonds of the proteins and altering protein configuration. ठीक है, mammals की बात कर रहे हैं. But the shark does not have this effect, because they have TMAO, which neutralizes and stabilizes those proteins in the presence of excessively high levels of the urea.